Over the last few years, continuous corn has really grown in popularity in the United States thanks to the good price of corn, the demand that there's been from livestock and ethanol, and a lot of farmers have been interested in this, but the problem is in a lot of cases, guys have tried to grow continuous corn and they've had issues. So we want to talk about that just a little bit today, what the issues were and what the solutions are.
One of the other things, Brian, is Roundup resistant weeds. There are a number of farmers that I talked to across the country that said, you know, I'm going to go back to raising corn because I can kill the weeds there. In soybeans, I'm really having a tough time.
Because a lot of these resistant weeds are broadleaf weeds, and it's always easier to kill a broadleaf in a grass crop like corn. We have a lot of good weed control options in corn.
But here's the downside though. Guys said, I'm going to plant more corn, but here's the problem. In my second year of corn, I'm expecting to get less yield than I did my first year. And I say, well, why is that? Why should you get less yield? In many cases, we're getting more yield the more years we raise corn in a row. And one of the big keys is we've got a lot of residue after a corn production. And so we've got lots of high carbon, low nitrogen residue. And when we add nitrogen fertilizer back into the mix, the bacteria that are going to break down that residue will often tie a lot of that nitrogen up as we start the process of breaking down residue. So that's one of the big challenges. The other big challenge is, in most cases, many farmers who are doing a 2-year supply of fertilizer have completely underestimated the amount of fertilizer that corn is taking up. So as we've already grown 1 year of corn and taken more fertilizer out than what we put back into the field, now we're going into year 2 in a depleted soil and doing that same program again where we're not putting on enough fertilizer. And you can see how this problem is going to compound itself, and in just a few years we're going to have some issues if we don't address it.
For all those things, we absolutely can address them and we can fix those problems, and we'll talk about that. But the one issue that we can't fix is the fact that if we're going to raise big time corn yields, it takes a lot of water. If we're going to raise soybeans on our farm, for example, it takes a little bit less water to raise the soybean crop than the corn crop, and also when the water comes is a little different. With corn, we need the water just a little bit earlier in the year. Soybeans need their water in August especially. So depending on when you're getting rainfall in your area and the total amount of rainfall you get, that may be a reason to stay away from continuous corn. But assuming you get normal rains, I mean, chances are you're not going to have a drought year every year, hopefully at least on your farm. So if you get normal rains, we look at this continuous corn thing, and kind of where Darren started was on this residue that you have out there. The point is you can build organic matter on your farm, and when you do that and build organic matter in your soil, you're going to have a richer soil. You've got a lot more long-term potential to raise high yields. That's all stuff we want to do. But here's the problem. A lot of guys look at corn and say, oh my goodness, there's all this residue I have to deal with. I have to do major tillage. In a lot of cases, you don't have to do that. Here are our suggestions. Number 1, use a chopping corn head. Get those pieces of residue in as small a piece as possible because it's going to break down a lot quicker. 2, make sure you have ample nitrogen out there to help break down that residue. So either you put on lots of nitrogen during the year and there's plenty in your stock yet, or if you're a little bit short towards the end of the year, throw some more nitrogen and throw a little sulfur with it in the fall to help break those stalks down. The other thing is try to leave your roots as much intact as possible. That's actually where organic matter comes from. It's not all the residue you see on top of the ground. It's the roots. As much as you see above ground, when you see a great big corn plant out there, that's how big the root system is. So just think what happens when all that breaks down, it decays in the soil. That's what builds your organic matter. So leave that root system intact as much as you can.
Well, building up organic matter is one of the goals for me, and that's why I've been doing some continuous corn, because I've got this high residue crop that's going to help me accomplish my goals if I'm leaving that root mass intact. Now, to do that, we've got to get the right fertility program out there too. And you addressed what the nitrogen needs are going to be.
I didn't really get into that too much though, and that's a very key point. Typically, we're talking an extra 50 to maybe even as much as 100 pounds more nitrogen that you need in that continuous corn rotation, at least for the first 3 years or so, as opposed to when you're raising corn on soybean ground.
Well, you've got to get the whole system going. You got to have enough nitrogen out there that the bacteria can break down that residue. And I can already hear some of the nervousness. Hey, I don't want to put too much nitrogen out there and then I'm just going to lose it. a lot of that nitrogen is going to get tied up by the bacteria in this residue breakdown process. So if you do put just a little bit extra on, that's okay in most cases because it's going to be all tied up in the process. So it's going to release over time. But you need to have some sort of guideline about how much you can put on at one time. This is where our good soil sampling program comes into play. We look at the cation exchange capacity, and our general rule of thumb is take your cation exchange capacity times 10. That will tell you the approximate amount of nitrogen that your soil soil can hold at any one time. So let's just say your cation exchange capacity is 20. You multiply that times 10, that equals 200 pounds of nitrogen you could hold at one time. So if you have a little bit of carryover from last year, let's just say you have 20 pounds of nitrogen left from your last crop. That means you could put another 180 pounds on to get up to your full 200 if you want. That's not saying you have to put it out at any certain time of the year. I'm just saying that let's just look at it as I'm going to put on 250 total. I can only have 200 out there at any one point. So I can put some out early and then I can come back side dress or a later application in the season once some of that nitrogen has gotten used up.
So here's the other big thing with corn. Yes, we don't want to lose that nitrogen, but we'd also like to keep it in the right form in the soil. Plants want to take in ammonium nitrogen as opposed to nitrate nitrogen. They can pull both in, but the problem is when they pull the nitrate in, they have to convert it over to ammonium anyway, so that takes extra energy. So use a nitrogen stabilizer, split apply your nitrogen like Darren had mentioned, and then you'll be a lot better off long term.
And in terms of fertility, we do have the free Ag PhD fertilizer removal app you can download on your smartphone or on your tablet. Take a look at that. Type in your yield goal, but don't just look at what the grain is going to remove. Look at what your stover is going to need also. Make sure you have plenty of P and K and sulfur and micros available for your whole crop so you don't have issues with standability or yield.
Well, the other thing, we talked a little about the residue already, but I just wanted to finish up on that real quick. So we said try not to destroy those roots below ground. Well, if you've got a whole bunch of residue on top of the ground, you say, well, how am I going to get rid of all that? On our farm, we've gone to strip till. We've also done a fair amount of using something like a twister. It's got coulters, and all we're doing is getting a little bit of soil up along with that residue, and we're cutting the residue just a little bit more so it breaks down faster. If we do that in the fall, we do some strip till also in the fall, we don't have a lot of residue left by spring, and then we can get a good seed bed. We can plant that crop well. That's our big concern. We want to make sure we've got a warm seed bed to go into. We get the crop up and running as quickly as possible, because that does sometimes become an issue in continuous corn with a colder seed bed.
Well, let's talk about planting that crop, and it all starts with picking the right variety or the right hybrid. There's a lot. We can talk about continuous corn all day long, but let's just real quickly talk about which hybrid is going to be successful for you. You need to choose a hybrid based on, number one, your defensive characteristics that you have to have. For example, if you have Gauss's wilt, it's a bacterial disease. There's really no way to stop it in crop that's been highly effective and consistent. So you have to pick a tolerant hybrid.
Because Gauss's wilt is a lot worse in continuous corn.
Now, if you've got gray leaf spot, I would strongly suggest picking a hybrid that can handle gray leaf spot, in addition to using a good fungicide program later on.
Well, once again, continuous corn absolutely can be successful in most operations. Just make sure you're addressing the nutrients. Try to build your soil organic matter if you can by not totally destroying the root system going from year to year, and pick the right hybrids based on a continuous corn situation.
Well, one of the weeds that may pop up in any crop rotation is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?